lifting each other up. Those who are always lifting others up, it's good for everybody to come together and encourage each other and say, get back out there and keep fighting a good fight.
It was supposed to be an ordinary Sunday morning at Fellowship Church, a day of worship, community, and hope. The sanctuary was filled with laughter, songs, and the unmistakable energy of a congregation that adored its leader. Pastor Charles Jenkins, known for his booming voice and heartfelt messages, stood at the pulpit preaching with his usual passion. No one could have predicted that within minutes, that same pulpit would become the center of chaos, fear, and prayer. Witnesses remember his voice starting to tremble, his hand gripping the podium tighter than usual. Some thought it was just emotion. But then came the moment that silenced the entire room. The moment when the pastor everyone admired suddenly collapsed before their eyes. The crowd gasped, then screamed as ushers and medical staff rushed to the front. Panic erupted inside a place once filled with peace. What had started as a sermon about faith turned, in seconds, into a desperate plea for a miracle. The chaos. Inside the sanctuary, people ran toward the stage. Others froze in disbelief. Trained medical volunteers within the church pushed through the crowd, checking his pulse and trying to keep him stable. Some called 911, while others fell to their knees, crying out in prayer. The choir that had filled the room with music only moments earlier now stood motionless, their eyes wide and tearful. Outside, the sound of sirens approached. In a matter of minutes, paramedics entered the church, moving with precision and urgency. The sight of their beloved pastor being lifted onto a stretcher broke hearts across the sanctuary. Members held hands and prayed aloud as he was carried away, their tears mixing with whispered words of faith. The joyous atmosphere of worship was replaced by a heavy stillness, the kind that lingers long after the sound fades. Outside the church, flashing red and blue lights painted the morning sky as people gathered, unsure what to do except pray. From the pulpit to the hospital. The news spread faster than anyone could control. By the time Pastor Jenkins reached the hospital, half the congregation already knew what had happened. Within an hour, messages of shock flooded social media. Number sign "Pray for Jenkins" began trending nationwide as clips of the incident circulated online. The church released a short statement confirming that Pastor Jenkins was alive but in critical condition. Beyond that, they asked for privacy and prayers. Inside the hospital, his family stood close, refusing to leave his side. His wife, described by those around her as strong yet heartbroken, thanked everyone for their support, but asked for space to focus on her husband's recovery. Church leaders gathered in the waiting area, exchanging quiet words and prayers, trying to make sense of something that seemed unthinkable. The congregation waited anxiously for updates, clinging to hope while grappling with disbelief. The internet storm and the search for answers. As hours passed, love and speculation filled the same digital space. Thousands of well-wishers sent messages of encouragement and faith, but rumors began to swirl. Some claimed it was exhaustion, others blamed stress or overwork. Without clear details from the hospital, uncertainty gave rise to confusion. People began to realize that this wasn't just about one man's health. It was about the immense pressure placed on pastors everywhere. Many began asking difficult questions. How much weight can one leader carry before it becomes too heavy? Why do those who give so much of themselves often feel they can't show weakness? The conversations online grew louder, and though the church tried to redirect focus back to prayer, the public had already turned the story into something larger, a reflection of faith, humanity, and the limits of endurance. The hidden weight of ministry. As more details surfaced, one theme began to dominate the conversation: the unseen toll of leadership. Behind every sermon, event, and outreach effort are sleepless nights, long travel days, and emotional weight that few ever see. Pastors are expected to be unbreakable, to comfort others, solve crises, and keep smiling no matter the pressure. But they are human, too. Jenkins's collapse became a mirror reflecting a truth many had ignored. Spiritual leaders carry burdens that can silently erode their strength. His story reminded people that rest is not weakness, and that taking care of one's health is part of the divine calling itself. The ICU becomes a place of faith. Inside the hospital, doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize Pastor Jenkins. Every small sign of progress, a movement, a flicker of awareness, filled the room with cautious hope. The medical team remained guarded in their optimism, warning that recovery would take time and patience. Family and friends took turns sitting by his side, praying quietly. One insider described a powerful moment when Jenkins briefly opened his eyes and whispered, "Tell the church I love them." That single sentence spread quickly among members and staff, reigniting faith that their pastor was still fighting. Nurses later remarked on how many visitors had come to the waiting room, offering words of gratitude and singing softly in the hallways. It was a hospital floor unlike any other, one filled with faith, community, and compassion. When faith meets reality. Even as prayers continued, church leaders faced difficult decisions. Doctors advised that a full recovery would only be possible if Jenkins took extended time off. That news sent shockwaves through leadership meetings. For years, he had been the voice, the face, and the heart of the ministry. The idea of worship without him seemed almost impossible. Yet, in this challenge came a necessary realization. No ministry can depend on one man alone. True leadership means preparing others to rise when the unexpected happens. Behind closed doors, elders began drafting plans for temporary replacements, outreach adjustments, and pastoral care to keep the congregation spiritually nourished during the uncertainty. The hope was not just for Jenkins's healing, but for the church to learn resilience. The lessons within the crisis. As days passed, the conversation grew deeper. Pastors across the country began opening up about their own struggles, sleepless nights, anxiety, burnout. What happened to Jenkins wasn't just a tragedy. It became a national moment of reflection. The collapse that once terrified a congregation was now teaching churches everywhere a vital truth. Strength is not measured by how much one can endure, but by the wisdom to rest before breaking. One elder put it perfectly during a vigil. Maybe God is reminding us that even the strongest need time to breathe. Those words captured what many were feeling, sorrow mixed with revelation. A wake-up call for the church. The situation surrounding Pastor Jenkins grew beyond one congregation's tragedy. It became a symbol for churches worldwide. Members began volunteering to share responsibilities, checking on one another, and learning that ministry was never meant to rest on a single set of shoulders. In a time defined by uncertainty, faith communities found purpose again, not in the performance of worship, but in the practice of care. The outpouring of love transformed fear into unity. Even those who had been critical online began sharing messages of forgiveness and understanding. It was clear that what had started as a heartbreaking moment was now becoming a movement of awareness and compassion. Hope beyond the headlines. Weeks later, updates from the family gave reason for cautious optimism. Jenkins was said to be responding positively to treatment, showing steady progress. Though the road ahead remained long, faith persisted. Outside the church, candles still burned, and prayers continued to echo. The story of his collapse no longer carried only pain, it carried purpose. It inspired new conversations about mental health, balance, and the humanity of those who lead. His struggle became a reminder that even the most powerful voices sometimes fall silent, but silence can lead to transformation. Conclusion. The message. Behind the moment. The day Pastor Charles Jenkins collapsed was more than a tragedy. It was a turning point. It stripped away the illusion of invincibility and reminded believers everywhere that faith leaders are people first, capable of breaking, healing, and growing. It also showed how love and prayer can transcend fear. In the weeks that followed, his congregation found a new kind of strength, one rooted not in performance, but in shared purpose. Pastor Jenkins's story became bigger than the man himself. It became a message that ministry must be shared, that rest is sacred, and that in the face of chaos, faith still has the power to hold communities together. And while his journey to recovery continues, one truth remains unshaken. The same voice that once inspired thousands is still inspiring them, even in silence, to believe, to care, and to never take life or leadership for granted.